Today I'm taking a look at the Sony FX30 recently announced camera, fully opinion based. I have not had any hands-on time with the camera. Okay, here's the main Sony page. It looks just like the FX3, which is the full frame version of this camera. Very focused on video, but it does take photos. You know, they're just saving a few bucks here and there. Obviously the smaller sensor is what you need to keep in mind. Currently recording this with the A6000 from Sony and the standard kit lens that comes with it. Looks pretty decent. It's going through HDMI and a really cheap HDMI capture device. If I had the FX30, I could do full USB power plus the webcam. I've seen some of the videos. Very consistent. Even back in the A6000 days, autofocus is very good on the Sony cameras. So you would expect the FX30 to be even better. It does have the in-body stabilization, which is very nice. Sony's stabilization with the sensor isn't amazing, but it's there. It's functional. With video focused cinema type cameras, sometimes they do not include stabilization with the sensor, but in this case they do. I think it's a good thing. It does have the dual card slots. I think this is a very important feature for video these days, especially if you're doing some type of professional video work. Having an instant backup in the camera is very, very nice. So similar to another camera that was relatively recently out is the Canon R7. It has the dual card slots, and as far as I understand it, that camera also does backup video recording to the 2 card slots. Very important feature in my opinion. Good to have backup. This one you can buy it with this XLR audio adapter. It does have a fan in the camera. Potatojet's video specifically, he does a test with heating the camera up in this device and it didn't have any issues. When talking video, price is generally going to be more expensive than photo cameras. In this case, that is true. Body only price $1,799.99, but considering a cinema camera, quote unquote, you know, there's a cinema camera tax. I think it's reasonable, but I would have liked to seen it closer to the Canon R7, even though that is a photo camera. It has a lot of similar features, functionality, and it has a viewfinder, so that adds some cost on Canon's side. Now maybe the fan and the backside illuminated sensor of the Sony cost a little bit more for them. They do make their own sensors like Canon. Pure speculation, but I feel like Sony could have potentially gone cheaper with this camera. But with their target market, they're used to more expensive prices. I would have preferred $1,500 or lower, but yeah, maybe eventually, who knows. And then if you want the XLR included with it, that's a few extra $100. Go into what I do with my video stuff are the Canon M6 Mark II. I have 2 of these now. So we've got the silver one, and in the back here, this one in a cage with the Atmos Ninja 5. So these cameras are not ideal for video in some situations, but they're definitely the best in this mount. They do 4K, and I think it looks decent. Another big native of older photo focus cameras is that they have a cap of 30 minutes per video clip internal recording. I get around it with this Ninja 5 recorder. In this case, it does support H.265. It's hard to understand all of this information at the moment, but at the very least, it's in there. I don't know how low you can go with the bit rates. Still get a decent picture out of it. But in my case with the Ninja 5 in the background, it does H.265 with an add-on, $100 for the codec. And I bought that. It works well. It's very efficient and it looks fine to me. So in that case, I think this could replace both the Ninja 5 and one of my cameras. The FX30 is significantly better for video, obviously, but it is a lot more expensive than something like this. But if you factor in the cost of the Ninja 5 plus one camera, and then also this has the smallest, most damage-prone HDMI port on the camera compared to the full-size port in the FX30. You know, little features like that are a very nice quality of life improvement with video work. The lenses that I currently use, I did sell a lot of my equipment recently. I have the 22mm f2. I think that would be a nice option for video work. This specific lens isn't the most amazing for video based on how the autofocus functions, but it works well enough. So it's a good talking to the camera type lens. Also the 56mm f1.4 from Sigma. This is available in the E-mount. If I need a close-up second angle for video, I'll potentially use this because that camera is going to be further away from where I am. If I want to do macro work, I just use some extension tubes currently. 11 to 22mm. In this case, it's a variable aperture. It does have stabilization in the lens. Sony has, I think it's the 10 to 20mm or 10 to 18mm, which we'll look at, but more expensive by quite a bit. This is a 33mm Viltrox. Focal length a little bit closer. Again, if I don't use a 56, I might use this instead. Another Sigma. This is 60mm f1.4. This is available for E-mount. I use this a lot for hands-on stuff. One of the big benefits for the E-mount in mirrorless, there are a lot of lens options available in APS-C and full frame. They'll work just fine on the FX30. Obviously, third-party options, even though Sony is a relatively open mount, you should expect Sony lenses to work the best on these cameras. They'll have some features like focus breathing, a way to counter it. It is in this camera. I don't know exactly how it works. It might be just for the Sony lenses. So if you want focus breathing correction, make sure to get a Sony lens. So this one, a 50mm, not something I would normally get, but it would work in a pinch, especially it's relatively cheap. Does have autofocus. Same thing with the Tamrons. I think these do have a lot of focus breathing. So 24 f2.8, that could be a potentially interesting one for video. Obviously no stabilization in there. So this is going to be similar to my 22mm f2, about the cheapest option you can find. I have used this Sony FE 50mm f1.8. I was not a fan. It's very cheap feeling. The focus ring's not great. I would avoid this lens personally. Not a big fan of it. The 16mm f2.8, this is another really old Sony lens. Maybe if you could find it used, it might be an interesting option. 16mm, it's pretty nice on APS-C. That could be a potential replacement for the 22 that I use. This is one of the trio of Sigma lenses that they have for all their APS-C cameras. So in this case, I got the 2 here. I don't have the 30. A friend does have this lens. It does have a bit of aberrations and such, but it's just a decent option. So I got 35, 33. This is basically the one that I have here, but in silver for EFM mount. 55 to 210 with stabilization. Apertures are not great. If you really wanted some distance for your video work, you could try that out as an option. 30mm f3.5, that's another older lens. It has macro capability. When I'm doing product videography, something like that would probably be pretty nice because it would focus closer. I could see that as a potential option for hands-on videos if you do that type of thing. This is the lens I'm using with my webcam right now, the 16-50. Not a great lens, but you can see even in this situation, it's not the worst thing ever. It works. So here's the Sigma 16mm that I have for EFM mount. I think this is a great option. It's not the smallest lens ever, but it's nice. I like it. Autofocus is quiet. 12mm f2. I think this could be an interesting option for vlogging. There is a lot of options with E-mount, which is nice. Here's the 56 that I have. This looks interesting. Viltrox 13mm f1.4. Oh, so many third parties are filling out the lower end. Sony 28mm f2. This is looking a little bit more interesting. Not sure how old this one is, but you could potentially buy it used, save quite a bit of money. Price-wise, we're starting to get into the Sony lenses. You should expect autofocus to generally be more consistent. The Sony 11mm f1.8, that is a newer lens, potentially be an interesting option for vlogging. It does not have stabilization in the lens, but this camera does have the stabilization on the sensor plus digital. So here's an interesting one. 11 to 18mm does not have stabilization, but you do get 11mm on the wide end. Here's an interesting option for video work. 18 to 105 f4 with stabilization, and it also has the power zoom functionality. So on gimbals, if you want to zoom and use the gimbal at the same time, you need one of those power zoom lenses. There's another interesting option for vlogging or such. 11 to 20mm f2.8. I've seen some comparisons. I think it was Christopher Frost that did it, and he preferred this one over the Tokina. This is probably the lens that I would get to replace my 11 to 22mm. It has the stabilization in the lens. There are other options for video work. All the Panasonic cameras, if you're into those, I have not personally used any of them, but GH5, GH6, GH5 II, GH5S. I don't know about the G9, that's more photography focused, but GH5, GH6 series. R7 does have the stabilization with the sensor, does have the dual card slots, and as far as I understand it, you can also record video to both cards at the same time. And Fujifilm with the X-H2S, this is the most impressive APS-C sensor out currently. It is stacked, so you're getting a lot of data readout quickly. Rolling shutter is probably the lowest of any APS-C camera, but you can see it's very expensive. But they also have the X-H2 now, which is going to be more rolling shutter, but you can do 8K video. Personally, I'd consider the R7 for video work, but there might be some issues with overheating and such. Oh, there is the 10 to 20mm f4. It does not have stabilization, but it is a power zoom type lens, so that would be good on gimbals if you're into that. Anyways, interesting option. It's nice that Sony is releasing more APS-C cameras. In this case, very video focused, but still cool camera. Personally, I would potentially get into Sony if I had $1,800 times 2 plus lenses, but currently not going to happen. We enjoyed this opinion-based talk on the FX30 and Sony E-mount lenses. Scott Photography Banzai, thanks.